Hey, welcome to Dealing with the Howards podcast. I'm Tom Howard. I've been doing this with my sister Catherine for a little while. We have bought and sold multiple businesses in the air conditioning and plumbing space, and a few others, honestly, that I don't talk about a whole lot, that I may or may not have, should have or should not have done. I'm not sure yet, depending on how they turn out. But anyway, we have a guest on here today, Clay Caswell. Clay, tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Clay Caswell. I started my heating and air company about 10 years ago. We are in Auburn, Alabama. I started with my grandfather. He's done it for 37 years. I kind of started my own business. We rode together for 8 years, kind of stayed a small company for a while. Minimum repairs, take care of people, have that trust factor. And grandfather started kind of getting older, so we started kind of growing a little bit, bringing on some help. Currently, we're at $1.5 million at the very entry point of taking the next steps to growth, as far as talking with branding and marketing agencies, and just taking the next step to become a more profitable business, be a long-term solution, and kind of start taking over a lot of market share. So super excited as to what's to come. We've got a very big year. Super excited with the people we're going to work with. And Tom, I know you've got a lot of good experience in a lot of this area. At kind of the thresholds and boundary points, and super excited to kind of get together and pick your brain and kind of see where we can go from here.
Awesome. Glad to have you on. What are the main points that you want to get to today? It sounds like you mentioned branding and things, but other things?
Yeah. Overall, mainly thresholds, going from a $1.5 to $3 million company, taking the next steps to 5 and 10. Kind of thresholds you've seen to kind of look ahead, start implementing now that we may or may not have started on, but need to be aware of. Obviously, advantages to taking market share and basically controlling your EBITDA as efficiently as possible, really. Trying to, plug all the holes in the bucket before they get holes, and maximize the opportunities that we have moving forward.
Cool. I'm glad to hear it. There's a lot of people that listen to this that probably are in that 1 to 3 range, or 5 range, and they want to go to the 10 range.
Sure.
Yeah. So do you have any specific questions to start with, or just want me to hop in?
Yeah. Overall, so far, your exact thoughts on the top key areas for a company that may be at the $1.5, $3 million mark. That we've personally been a small company, family owned, work with my grandfather, and we're taking the growth stage, and for the past year and a half, done a lot of processes, done a lot of, implementation on customer experience, asking questions, showing photos, educating the customer, to kind of generate more income, provide that customer experience. But we've only done that for a short time, and we're just learning what the next steps are to advance, but efficiently advance, not just do it.
How many techs do you have?
So there's 5 techs, 1 office staff, and myself.
5 techs, 1 office staff. And what do you do?
So currently I'm in the office, just controlling, basically I'm sales management, service management, and then obviously efficiency overall.
Okay, cool. And do you just heat and air, or do you do plumbing as well? Or
primarily we're just heating and air right now.
Heating and air. Okay. And so you're thinking, hey, I'm sitting here at 1.5, and you're in Alabama. So I'm assuming you get a cold season and a hot season, but I'm assuming the hot season in the summer is probably more of a revenue draw than the
do. So we do have peak seasons. Obviously June, July, August, usually January, February. In between we have the dips and highs and lows, but we do have kind of a in and out seasons to make sure we prioritize maximum opportunities.
Yeah, sounds good. So if I was sending $1.5 million, what's your advertising budget right now?
So right now we're spending about $3,500. We're trying to stay around. We were staying around 5% of our revenue, whether it be towards billboards or in-house marketing, whether it be Facebook ads, stuff like that. So
$3,500 a month. Sorry, I'm just going to try to get through this so that you'll get it faster. So if you have $3,500 a month and you multiply that by 12 months, is $42,000. Is that roughly your budget for the year?
So that's pretty much what we've had towards billboards specifically, and we'll have odds and ends for community stuff, local areas for recreational and different local areas. So we're probably spending about $5,000 a month overall. 3,500 is more billboards and branding.
So you got 5,000 a month times 12, so it's about 60 grand a year.
Correct.
And you're doing 1.5 million in revenue. So that's about 4% cost of marketing.
Okay.
And everyone asks me, like, what's a good percentage for my marketing spend? And that it's just a bad question, because the reality is, like, it depends on how fast you want to grow. It depends on what your market's like, that kind of stuff. There's just so many things. The real question is, like, how much should it cost me to acquire a customer?
Right.
Because that always stays the same. If you want to grow fast, you got to spend more on marketing to acquire more customers. If you want to have slower growth, you don't need to spend as much to acquire new customers, because you're just going to go for, it's a lot cheaper to, advertise to your existing base.
Sure.
So people listening, don't get caught up on the, should I be spending 5% or 4% or 10% or whatever. I have some people that one guy I know got acquired by a private equity firm, and he was spending 12% cost of marketing, and they flipped out and said, you should be down at 6% like the rest of our group. He said, well, the rest of your group's growing at 20%. I'm growing 100%. Do you want me to drop all my growth rate?
No way.
And they just got quiet. And it's like, how come this is super easy to understand? If you want to grow faster, like, you're gonna have to buy your market share.
Sure.
Anyway, so we can look at, you said you're not growing very much, though. You're like 1.5 million in revenue.
Yeah. So we kind of hit a little stagnant point. Obviously, in the past 2 years, we're fairly newer and trying to get or prioritize A players in the company. So it's been me and my grandfather for 8 years. In the past 2, we kind of started shifting and transitioning to more of a customer base, providing a service versus.
I'm not familiar with Alabama. How many people live in Auburn?
So we've probably got about 400,000.
Okay, so you got plenty of room to grow.
Yeah.
For those people on here that don't know about, how big they can grow in their market or how big their market share is, I've got videos on the acquisition guide to calculate market share. And with 400,000 people there, you could probably sustain, I'm just guessing, I haven't run through that calculation in your town, but you're looking at potentially like a $40 million market just for you.
Sure.
Maybe 50 million. So you're probably 50. You're probably fine. You have a lot of room to grow.
Major university in the town, so we're good there.
Yeah, I figured it was pretty big because Auburn football. That's basically all I know about Auburn. Yeah, if I was you guys, there's a few things. At 400,000 people, $5,000 a month, 3,500 in branding is probably not what I'd be looking at.
Sure.
There's a few reasons for that. One is that when you start doing branding is all about repetition. So people have to see your logo a lot over and over and over again in order to remember who you are and get used to it. Additionally, the brand that you do have, it's just so people that are listening just on the audio side here, it looks like a sun with like the
just most common terrible logo you can have from a I guess an 18-year-old kid that started his own company.
Yeah, it's a sun with a snowflake. So it's half a sun, half a snowflake. It is like every air conditioning and heating company. And so when you do branding for that, what you're doing is you're branding for the industry.
Correct.
You're saying, hey, it's an air conditioning and plumbing company. And so when they see that, they don't think, what's the name of your company?
Just Caswell, last name company.
Okay. So they're not thinking Caswell Heating Air, which, by the way, Caswell Heating Air is hard to remember. Lee's, my company, I would have changed the name in a heartbeat because it's named after the Lee family. Not that I don't like the Lee family, it's just that naming it after a name doesn't stick in your head, right? If you named it like Purple Goblin Air Conditioning, that would be much more wide because no one's seen a Purple Goblin before, and like it just sticks out in your head. If you look
I was just gonna say I've actually got talking with Dan, and we've already got a contract, and on the 17th we're doing our kind of logo. They're gonna give us some options and go from there. So we are in the current branding phase.
Yeah, go through that. By the way, I would definitely change it from Caswell if I was you. Like your size, if I was smaller when I rebranded, I definitely would have changed the name from Lee's.
Sure.
And we named a company in Vegas called Fetch a Tech, and Fetch a Technician, and that was great. And we could do all this stuff with the branding. Dan came up with it. It was awesome. And so when you start doing branding, what happens is when you change your name and change your logo and that kind of stuff to a brand that's more recognizable and kind of sticks out in your head. The Fetch a Tech one had a dog on the side with a wrench in its mouth for Fetch a Tech. And people would look at it and they thought it was a dog grooming service, but then it said heating air, just like stick out in their head, like, oh, that's the weird one with the dog.
Yeah.
You know, we became the second largest air conditioning and heating company in Vegas in a year out of 1,700. And we didn't have to spend a ton on marketing. I think we spent 6 or 7%, sometimes 8 or 10 off season. Anyway, when you're your size, there's plenty of stuff you can do for direct sale that isn't branding. So branding is good when you can get that repetition, but if you've got 400,000 people in your town, you're only going to spend $3,500 a month on branding, it's got to be a really small area that you market to get for $3,500 a month to get enough repetition with people that it hits. So what I did in that, when I was your size, I picked one corner of the town. I didn't do any branding, first of all, till I was like above 5 million. But even when I got to 5 million, I picked one corner of the town that I knew people would recognize who I was because my trucks were there all the time. And then I put the billboards in that one tiny area, all within like a quarter mile of my shop. And then in that area, not a quarter mile of my shop, a quarter mile of a radius from this one zip code I was always in. And it was just one zip code, not the whole city. There's like 30 zip codes in Fresno. There's 1 million people, 500,000 in the actual city. And we had that one zip code. And then I put all my billboards there, and I put all of the Google ads only went in that area. I would drop a pin in that area. I would do everything that I could target was just that area. So everyone that was in that tiny little area thought I was huge. Everyone outside of that area had no idea who I was and didn't even think anything of me. Right. And I was spending at least $5 or $6 grand a month just on branding at that point. And so then but the thing is, I would get enough repetition in that area that people remember who I was. And then I would generate calls. Because if you spend, $500 here, $500 there, $1,000 there, you don't get enough repetition with that area. So like, you just don't get any calls from that.
Sure.
And unless it's like somebody that just happens to live right next to the billboard you put up. And so they just see it every single day.
Right.
Anyway. And so what happens is you start getting market penetration. The zip code I loved was 93711. I'll never forget it. And we wanted everybody in that zip code to know exactly who we were. And what happens is when you start advertising like that, your trucks are always going to that area because that's where you're getting all your calls. And so then they start seeing your trucks all the time. And those people in that zip code said, oh my gosh, I see your trucks everywhere. Well, yeah, because it's in their zip code. If they're outside of their zip code, they don't see anything, but they don't realize that because every night they come home, they're like, oh my gosh, another truck. And I had like 8 trucks, and if I branded all over the city, you might see my truck once every 6 months, once a year. And that's not enough to stick in your head. Like, oh, that's a big company that I can trust. And what you're really doing with branding is you're trying to build trust. You're trying to say, hey, like we're for real, we're legit, and we know what's going on. At any rate, I don't know if you're doing that or not, but just focus it in a small area. I would spend a lot more on the direct sales stuff, like maybe an ad on Yelp or your Google local service ads or whatever else you can do. Before I do any more branding, I would turn off the billboards or whatever else and just get your brand done from Dan. And then I'd spend some money on branding after that. Okay. Dan has great stuff. What's your profitability right now?
So we're at 22% net.
That's fantastic. So, it's hard to maintain that as you get bigger.
Sure.
And a lot of the big private equity companies I know are in the 14, 15, 16% range.
Sure.
22 is definitely achievable as you get bigger, but just, you got to focus and make sure that you have those costs under control. Right. And I would definitely just make sure you're tracking everything. What CRM are you using?
So we're new to Service Titan about 2 months ago.
Okay, so you're in the scary hard work phase on Service Titan.
Oh yeah, the confidence has gone up a lot. So we're a lot better than we have, and got some good referrals to touch base with and help with odds and ends.
Make sure you're tracking everything on your Service Titan account when it comes to marketing. And the great news is you have Service Titan, so you can do all that. The other softwares, you can't do it nearly as easily. So I have about 1,000 tracking phone numbers on Service Titan that's tracking all that stuff. So make sure that you're watching every dollar on that. And that's what's going to get you from the 1.5 to 3 to 5 range. Next thing you want to do is, dude, your market's big enough. Don't set a goal for 3 million. When I was your size, I was 1.6 million in revenue. And my lifetime goal was to hit 3 million. And it took me almost 4 or 5 years to get there. I went from 1.6 to 1.82. The next year, that was 2012. 2013, I did 1.85 million. Yeah. And then 2014, I did 2.7 million. And then 2015, I did 3 million.
Sure.
And I thought I was on top of the world after going from 1.6 to 3.
Sure.
And it took me all those years. Let's see, that's 2011 was the year that they did, 2010 was the year that they did 1.6. And then I got there and then we did 1.82 in 2011. So anyway, you get the point. It's sort of like 4 years of like hard grinding to get to 3. And I made a goal my next year and I said, look, I'm going to grow. And I actually met somebody down in Texas named Ben Hubbard. He really changed my thinking about it. He was at 6 million. And I said, how long ago were you at 3 million? Because I was at 3 million at the time.
Yeah.
He said, about 3 years ago. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could be at $6 million. Holy cow.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I freaked out and I like made a org chart on my flight home about how I could get to, 6 million. And it really came out to like 5.8. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put it out. I'll do 5.
Yeah.
And so I came back to my staff and I said, hey, we're going to go from 3 to 5 million. We have new 5-year goal is $5 million bucks. And this is what we're going to do. And I figured out how many people I had to hire and what they had to look like. And I drew it all out on a piece of paper. And they got all excited. We hired the people we needed. And new 5-year goal, 5 million. And that year we went from 3 million to 5 million.
Yeah.
And we did like 5 million and 5,000, 5 million. Sure. It was like just barely over.
Man,
1 year instead of 5. And I was like, holy crap.
That's awesome.
I gotta make a new goal. New goal. 10 million, and it was crazy. And instead of 5 years, that year we did 9.4 million. So we went from 5 to 9.4. And it was just like the whole time I realized, and realistically, if I made a goal for 15, I probably could have hit it too.
Sure.
If I made a goal for 20. And what I realized was Ken Goodrich, I've told this a bunch of times, he came to me and one year he was looking at buying my company and he said, I was talking to him and he said, Tom, we just met. And he said, Tom, last year I hit my last lifetime goal which was to buy a private jet. Yeah. And he said, I did that and I have one regret. And I said, what? He said, I wish I would have made bigger goals sooner because I would have hit them too.
Yeah.
And so when you make this goal like 3 million, it just limits you. And now I know that if I just bought a company in Vegas, and I bought 2 companies in Vegas. They did like, I don't know, it was like 600,000 last year in January combined. And this year we're on pace right now for 1.8 million for the month of January.
Sure.
So from 1 year to the next, we basically tripled.
Right.
And I think, we're going to turn about $5 million in profit this year at that company alone. And that's part of Lee's. So the thing is, I realized you're so much more capable of things than you know. And that it comes down to your confidence, right? Like of what you're capable and willing to do. It's something that I just really wish that I would have done sooner.
Sure.
So if I'd say one thing that I'd really focus on is like make bigger goals faster and then put in the work to get there. I think that everything comes down to asking questions about stuff when it comes to marketing. I told you about the stuff I would do there.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a budget built yet?
I actually tried to get into Tommy Mello's budget one the other day, or what was it, a month ago with, I don't know if it was Ellen Rohr who was there.
I actually taught it, and then I taught the first day, and I taught the second day because I couldn't be there for the second day. I've always taught Tommy's budget classes, but yeah.
Yeah, I went to, I might get off track for just a second, but I went to the Home Service Freedom with Tommy in San Diego in September. And then we tried to make it to your house with Ishmael, but I had a family Christmas and I couldn't get out of that. So I had to skip on that ticket, unfortunately, but tried to make it out there with you on that day at your house. But
just if you can't get out to one of those, make a simple spreadsheet of like how much revenue I think, how many technicians that would take to do, how much would I need to spend in marketing to do that. I'll just have Andres get your email from you, and I'll send you my spreadsheet that I give to people when I'm at Tommy's event and when I'm at my house and whatever else.
Sure.
For Ishmael's event. I mean, all these guys are doing events and having me speak at them, but I'm like, I'll just give you the thing and just walk through it. It's not super intuitive because it's just a spreadsheet, but
sure.
You got to have something so you can look at like, okay, am I ahead or behind of where I want to go?
Sure.
And at that size, it is any size, it is mission critical to have a plan for the year.
Right.
And the plan is really your budget. It'll tell you how much I need to spend, how much I need to hire, how much, where I need to do things. And absolutely mission critical to have a budget. And I've got a few videos on budgeting and things like that. I should make some more videos and post them on our website on howarddeals.com. And but that is 100% something that I would get on. And that would tell you, hey, you make your plan and you get a lot less scared to spend money on marketing and things like that. If you have a plan of like, well, I'm going to spend this much on marketing, but this is how much revenue I get.
Sure.
And this is how many people I'm going to hire. And maybe I'm not going to do 22% this year. I'm going to do 20% EBITDA this year, but then the next year I'm going to go up to 23%,
sure.
Because I have a plan. And it's clearly articulated. So it's, I would 100% make that. In fact, before you even touch your marketing or your branding, I'll do your budget for the year and build in the cost of like what you're spending on Dan Antonelli and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that we had a really good guy help us with one last year, and we broke it down, and we parted ways. But he was actually we sold train then, and that was one of our train reps, and we broke it down to how many calls we needed, how many conversations in the home we needed for replacement opportunities, and how many texts and all that stuff. So the spreadsheet will definitely guide me and allow me to focus on that, even if it's not there. But then I can always fill in the blanks to get us the questions asked. And
awesome. Awesome. Well, we got to wrap up here. Do you have any final questions?
Overall, if you had a quick answer to taking market share at a very cost effective, or some people like to give things away, not necessarily for free, but a crazy deal to take market share and hold new customers and bring them in the doors.
Don't do it. Don't, like, people get into this. I'm going to, do a low cost, thing to try to sell the job.
Sure.
It becomes this addiction that people do. I mean, look at what single computer company has the highest market share in computers? Apple, probably. Yeah.
Sure. Computers and phones, pretty much.
Phones. Is it because they offer cheap deals and cheap fees?
No, sir.
No. They have the most expensive laptops on the market. They have the most expensive phones on the market, and they have the most market share. Why? Because they branded themselves accordingly. And here's the funny thing. Did they call themselves Caswell computers? Did they call them Jobs computers?
Nope.
Steve Jobs or Wozniak computers? No. It's also Apple.
Brand.
Yeah. Like, why? Because you don't think of an Apple when you think of computers, and so it sticks in your head like, oh, that's an Apple.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, IBM
Yeah.
is tanking. Like most
Somewhere
of
out there.
there's an IBM computer.
Sure.
Like, yeah, it's hard because now it's like, well, it could be Lenovo or whatever else. But the truth is, like, that name wasn't great. Like,
Sure.
it's back then it made sense, but new branding and understanding of how we should do branding is, we have so much more intel now that, like, we know a lot better about branding. And that's why, even UPS, United Parcel Service,
Yeah.
they got to the point where they realized, like, hey, like, UPS isn't going to make it, and they that's not a name that we should be running with. And
Sure.
so they tied their brand around something totally different, the color brown. If you see a brown, you think UPS. And it got so interesting that they dropped their name off their commercials for sometimes. I was watching a commercial from UPS, and it was this guy talking, and he says, what you need to ask yourself is, what can brown do for you?
Yeah.
I was like, wait a second. They didn't even put their name on that. They didn't say, what can UPS do for you? They said, what can brown do for you? They basically own the color brown. And everyone knows when they see a brown truck, it's a UPS truck.
Oh, 100%.
You got to tie your brand around something like that, and then focus on that and focus on quality. And if that means you're not going to grab that, Mr. Jones who wants to buy his system for $8,000, who cares? My average ticket right now in Fresno, California, which is mostly a farming community, is $26,000.
Sure.
And now it's not that we're selling the unit for $26,000. I mean, sometimes if you get some inverter system, whatever, 5-ton inverter, you might be $30,000 on that. But it's a lot of times we're selling like a 14 SEER, 16 SEER, but then we're adding on ductwork for $12,000, and we're adding on a water heater, for $4,000 or whatever else, and to get that average ticket to $26,000. And that's what I would focus on. And we have the most market share in my town by far of any company. And our prices are high, and we're not afraid of that. We got to back it up with quality, and you got to make sure that you're answering the phone at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night in order to demand that kind of price. If you're not big enough to do that yet, that's fine. Just don't demand that price if you're not going to offer that level of service. But don't get stuck in I want to get market share, so I'm going to try to drop my price from someone else. Like, you stick on your price and you build confidence with your people and say, look, like, this is the level of service we're going to offer. And make sure they know that and go forward with that. But don't get caught in I want to take market share. The truth is, like, people will buy on average, they sell their home every 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
If you get that house because you dropped your price, they're going to move to another house, and they're not going to be your customer anymore before they need another unit. So it's like, there's no the recurring thing, especially when you don't have plumbing, is not as big of a deal as people think. That used to be. It used to be around memberships and everything else, but it's not nearly as big of a deal. It is a deal, and I can talk about that in another podcast.
There's got an area for it, but
yeah,
kind of like I was talking to at the Home Service Freedom Service Champions guy was like, obviously be the most expensive in your market. Obviously you have to bring that level of service with it. You can't ask for it and not provide, but don't try to be the middle guy. Don't try to be the low guy. He said, be what you want to be, charge what you have to charge, and stand behind it 100%. If there's a problem, take care of it. But you'll double, triple if you can hold that standard and hold that expectation, rather than try to beat the next guy or I'm just over market value, blah, blah, blah. I said, no, be the most expensive. Don't be afraid of it. Just stand behind it and do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, man. Really appreciate having you on here.
Yes, sir.
And I'll just get you that link on the budget spreadsheet.
Perfect.
Thanks so much, man.